Welcome to a new episode of People and Purpose podcast by GMG. With us today is our Chief Technology Officer, Kamal Shah. Together, we're going to explore how, in times of transformation, it is important to scale wisely and how technology can add value. Hi, Kamal. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Razan.
How are you today?
I'm doing really well. Pleasure to be here with you.
I'm very happy to have you. To be honest, I think this session is overdue by now. We should have probably had it in one of those early episodes, since every single subject in the market today is related to tech, whether it's e-commerce, whether it's AI, whether it's general technology. I mean, the subjects are everywhere. So how did you venture into technology? Was this a passion point from a young age? Was it one of those, I don't know what to do with my life, but I like technology, so I'll study IT? How did you land in this field?
Sure. Well, I would like to believe that I always had a passion for technology, but I think more than that, it was just about breaking things and playing with it, if you will. So more on the adventurous side. And that's how I think over the years, I kind of found myself being more at comfort with technology. It was just about experimenting and trying things out. And then, with the support of the family, the academics, the mentors, and the life learn experiences have kind of all blended together. And I find myself in the world of technology. So that's where I am.
So life led you to it.
Kind of, yes.
The world of technology is ever evolving. Like sometimes you can study something and you find yourself in the future looking back and saying it's no longer relevant.
Yeah.
What have been your largest challenges from, let's say, keeping up to date perspective?
Well, when we talk about technology, as you rightly said, it's really fast paced. It's moving at a light speed, if you will. And, there's so much information to be consumed. And then once you have consumed the information, I would say it's too much information to be consumed. And then once you have done that, it's really challenging to look for avenues through which you are going to either put to play and make good use of it, or it just goes into the back office, in the back of your mind as a redundant data set. My biggest challenge with the over fast-paced technology today is while it gives a feeling to the end consumer or, whoever is consuming this technology that everything in the world is possible, there are real constraints as well. There are constraints of resources. There are constraints of finance. There are constraints in and around, how fast an organization or a business process can evolve and keep pace with it. And, being an enablement leader, I find myself always being intrigued around how to keep pace with technology. And I think in many ways, if we can just do that, I think we will have a huge transformation success in front of us.
If you take this landscape and you apply it to organizations, I mean, you can't escape technology, right? And you highlighted financial, you highlighted resources, you highlighted a few challenges that you generally can face when talking technology. You joined us very recently at GMG. And obviously, I'm sure it takes no doubt for you to come in and say, right, this portfolio is large because it's very diverse. Two questions. What was a North Star that made you sign up for this role? And at the same time, how are you assessing the landscape that we currently have against your North Star?
Sure. That's a great question to really kick off our discussion and get into the meat of it. Let me kind of share with you a very one-line statement around what I think retail is all about. In my mind, I think retail is all about consumers. It's about principles, and it's about competition. So those are the three pillars through which I have always looked at retail, if you will. And the technology, if you will, which has kind of found its way, technology is a function which has found its way, if you will, from being a back office function to then being, in a more of a side seat, if you will, in helping business kind of meet their objectives. I think over the years, I find the technology is becoming more and more at the epicenter of the business. It becomes the key engine through which business is finding ways to transform. And so, when we talk about North Star in and around technology, I think it's predominantly, around a couple areas. Number one, I think technology and its adoption and consumption in the retail space is going through a sea of change. What was supposedly just a transaction and a system which was facilitating completion of the transaction is now becoming more and more experiential in nature. It's less about how fast we're able to input the data or how fast you're able to retrieve the data. It's about how much of that data can really drive decision making, how much of that data can really provide insights that will help you enable having a better relationship with the person that you're going to be engaged with. And so, the North Star, if you will, is in and around that in some ways. North Star for myself at GMG, I guess, is around, building a frictionless set of integrated systems which drives intelligence more pervasively within the organization. It's about making sure that information is flowing irrespective of where you are located, if you will, and the choice of devices or how you really connect to the web world, if you will. And last but not the least, it's also just about making sure that the volumes of data that we gather today and the effort and resources that we expend in gathering it needs to meaningfully drive results and value to the greater goodness of the organization. And North Star is around building that seamless, frictionless experiences.
But that takes us smoothly and nicely into the question that people always ask. In an organization like GMG that has so many different verticals, you're talking from sports to everyday goods to health and beauty, as well as all of the other smaller businesses. I mean, fundamentally, even all our support functions need tech. Our logistics team is fully dependent on it, right? And obviously, each one of those businesses is a different their principles are different, their consumers are different, their maturity is very, very different. How are you able to efficiently maximize the usage and implementation of technology in a landscape that's so complex, especially when geographies are also added to the equation?
There is no dearth of challenge.
Yeah.
And it's all the more relevant when it comes to technology because you want to ensure that every dirham or dollar spent gets you the highest level of return. And the complexities are myriad in nature. However, that said, I think there are parts of our technology landscape which are at the core of what we believe is going to help our organization drive and lead the sea of change that we are up against at this point. And so identifying our system of records, our system of transactions, our system where we are going to house our data, that is something that I believe has to be more uniform, more standardized. Then there are systems of competitive advantage, which I believe have to be designed to be more purpose-built to how the business would like to evolve and how it leverages those data sets in beating and dominating the competition itself. And then last but not the least is, there are systems which are essentially interfaces for our consumers, the ones which have to really provide high level of experiences through their user journey. And those are the ones which I believe have to be designed in a way where it's not just about one size fits all, but ones that gives them the higher trust in the way they engage with GMG as an organization. At the same token, drives a higher level of experiences. And so, when we look at system landscapes, or for that matter, just overall technology landscape, including infrastructure, security, and so forth, it's about identifying which of these drive competitive advantage for us. And that's the one where we put much of our resources and investment. However, in many other areas where these are standardized process, we try to also assimilate that through a standard technology stack itself. And that's how we really try to manage on the tech front. That said.
But does this kind of also work in parallel with the selection of the tech? Because we like to always say, okay, we're up to date. And as we rightfully said at the beginning, we're ever evolving, right?
Yep.
Is it always that the latest is the best?
In some areas, yes, but in many areas, not. So,
And how does that assessment happen?
yeah, I mean, at the core of what we really do, if you will, when it comes to investing in technology, there are a couple attributes that, play a formidable role in the decision-making process. First and foremost, it always goes back to the business. What's the business ask? What's the business demand? Because at the end of the day, as a technology is a function, it's about enabling the business. It's not just about experimenting. So understanding the requirements and dispositioning that with the right tools and platform is empirical. So that's number one. Once we have a fairly good understanding of that, then it's about the other aspects of the economics, if you will, because every solution has to kind of deliver the value, and economics is the other parameter. The third one is around ability for a platform or a solution, in this case, to disposition the requirements as best as it possibly can. And of course, no solution kind of meets 100%, but there are ways in which we believe it drives greater value. And so, we look at attributes such as how easy it is for us to adopt, how easy it is for us to drive data in and out of that system. At the same token, how it really helps us do scalability, security, and so forth. But when we talk about making decisions, I think it's about many of these platforms and solutions that we would invest in or we have already invested in kind of goes back to the wider question of what's our strategy. What do we want to really achieve? Because there are platforms and technology solutions that will help us drive growth more seamlessly with a lot of pace. Whereas there are few which are going to be purpose-built and that will help us improve just our efficiency. So I think we got to just calibrate around that. And that's why I said it depends. But at GMG, I think we have a proven framework and we are getting there. We are getting much better with it. But it's about ensuring that we always have the eye on the prize and we deliver the value in an optimal way.
And do you believe that the final decision on the choice of tech is or should be fully in the governance of the tech department? Or do you believe that the businesses have, or the P&L owners, should have a say in what is the final product? Or are they responsible purely for the brief?
That's an amazing question. And I would like to give you a consulting answer, but I'll refrain from doing this. And the reason why I say that is because while at the end of the day, the technology is not the master, it is there to serve the needs of the business. And so by design, business and the folks who represent the business should have their voice heard. They should be in the driving seat to identify how best to leverage technology to disposition those requirements. But, at the end of the day, we are also not just a business, we are many businesses. And that means that technology is at the epicenter of GMG and not just our footwear business or for our EDG business or for our healthcare and beauty business or for our logistic business and so forth. There are parts of technology that are used much more fundamentally at the common framework itself. And so the responsibility that I carry as part of the technology team is to identify what parts of those investments that we ought to do are in line with the strategy that allows us to achieve fast-paced growth, gives us resiliency, gives us ability to create redundancy in our systems so that we have high level of availability. At the same token, it helps us expand every dollar spent and optimize that, which may not be in line with what the business demands would be at that point in time, because they only look at it from a microscopic view of saying, here's what I really need to get through the next hurdle. But those hurdles for other businesses maybe are not near and now. They are going to be there as they mature. And so whatever the choice of solutions be, it has to be in line with the wider usage of it in the enterprise and not just a business itself. And so, the decision of what technology to be used, I think kind of sits with the technology leader. How it should be used and how it can become a success is also a responsibility that a technology leader needs to comply to. But all of that is only possible, I guess, with having a very strong partnership with the business and driving this change more closely with them.
Which then takes me to, I think, the fundamental fact that defines whether the decisions taken are actually successful or not. Is there actually a measure, an ROI measurement, that defines the success of the choice of technology used?
Yes, absolutely. There are different ways one could ascertain the true value that a technology will essentially drive within an organization or within a function or for a business process itself. It's just that we don't really push ourselves many times in putting a strong business case around what we ought to do. And then there is an element of, going that extra mile after going live to look for the value that has been realized as an outcome to that project or a program itself. I think once we start getting into that discipline, then whatever resources that we have expended for implementing that technology and that business process, I think we should be able to ascertain the value coming out of that investment itself.
In true value to business, what is AI for you from a business standpoint, and how is it best used to actually not make, because a lot of people assume that when AI comes, roles are going to become redundant. There was a whole discussion the other day in one of those conferences I attended about the fear factor of the introduction of AI. But then, as per our conversation now, you're almost talking, it's a way of doing business now. What's the tech translation of AI in business?
I think, AI, what started as artificial intelligence, which was kind of something that, everyone kind of felt it was distant out. It was only in movies, if you will. It was only on screen.
Yeah. Sci-fi.
It was all sci-fi. It's coming at a much faster pace in our personal lives. It's already there, if you haven't quite recognized it. But, if I were to kind of just backtrack a second and just look at how, individuals have kind of matured over a period, leveraging tools and technologies and devices, then, AI, in context to AI, it's all about, how individuals have gone ahead and done basic activities, if you will. For example, right? So if you are looking for something, back in days, it was about asking set of people and saying, okay, have the institutional knowledge or the herd mentality kind of drive you to the point that you want to do. And thereafter, with the advent of internet and so forth, it's about Google and looking at the search options and finding out the next possible best options, if you will. Mm-hmm. And then over a period, I think what has happened is, as a logical progression, individuals have started leveraging AI for, number one, search. And, it's not that the way you search is any different for most part. It is how the results are accrued and shared back with you. They make it more easy to read, they make it more easy to consume, and they make it more relevant. Yep. And I think that's a paradigm shift that many of us have experienced, if you will. And bulk of the user base today is kind of experiencing that. Then there is a subsection of those user base which has moved further along in looking and saying, okay, now that I have a smarter way of doing searches, what more can we possibly do? And that's where there is an element of looking and saying, okay, now I have this contextual search, how do I consume it much faster? And that's where the generative part have kicked in, whereby every information that's shared is summarized and packed in a way that's much more easier for us to consume. So, if you have 30 pages and if you want to just summarize, that's what AI is able to do it at this point in time very easily. And many of us have consumed information in that format as well. The next rollout of the same technology stack is around the agentic AI, which is, back in days, it was all about automating processes. But to do that, one had to identify different exceptions, user journeys, attributes and values, which had to be hard-coded because it would only work in a certain way, and it would not quite attest to different exceptions. And so the journey was very difficult for, completing a process from point A to point B, because you have to literally kind of make sure that everything is buttoned down. With AI, especially with the agentic model, and with LLMs and SLMs that have come in, ability to now configure all these attributes and not, work in a rigid way has kind of disappeared, if you think of it. You don't really have to codify every single line of business rules because much of that could be done via the machine learning itself. The element of executing tasks, downstream or upstream, is what agentic AI kind of allows you to do. And so it kind of stitches a value cycle that is extremely important from a business point of view to not just look at how we are doing things, but also about how we are completing those tasks and activities. And in a standardized way, if you will. So that to me is the most simplified view of AI. And then it's kind of changing every other aspects and attributes in and around how we perform things in today's day and age.
I think it's a very easy to consume response to the listeners, at least. If I was to take that same logic, because you've mostly, at least the way I understood it, you've spoken about the lifestyle adoption of AI at work. If I was to translate that back to the consumer, and you started the whole conversation on consumer, how much of that translates to the end consumer, or how much different is the translation to the consumer?
I think consumer is going to be at the center of everything that I believe we are going to do with AI. There are a couple aspects of it. I kind of reference around, the search engine. So if someone is looking for a footwear, they would either go to our e-com site or they would go to a generic search engine site and they would type that information.
Correct.
And then they would learn about the product. They will have better awareness. And that's what, that's a type of a customer, if you will, where they are doing the due diligence before they engage in completing the buying transaction. Now, in today's day and age, with AI, the search options are becoming less and less important.
Really?
Yes. You see the new millennials, if you will.
They're called Gen Zs.
And Gen Zs, sorry. Well, I'm thinking even the millennials in some ways, but yes, all the Gen Zs and folks who are essentially key influencers of how decisions around consumptions are being made. They are less and less looking at the conventional way of searching for a product and then doing the analysis and paralysis of it and saying, okay, this is what I think is going to be, best serving my interest or my preference. Instead, there is a social networking, which is extremely driving those influences.
Yes.
Number two, every aspect of that decision-making process is very much hinged on the value. And the AI engines are essentially curating volumes of data around that product, if you will, and giving you the best possible option to source that. So it's not just about a site which, the SEOs of the world were essentially dominating. Now it's about those agents which are now proliferated across the web world, and they're trying to gather that information. And it's also sharing information around how best to consume it, when to consume it, how to source it, and all of that. Fast forward tomorrow, I think, from a consumer point of view, I don't think consumers are the only ones who are going to be doing these activities. I do believe in foreseeable future, there will be agents of consumers who will be triggering these searches and giving recommendations back. And I think as a technology leader, if you will, we are acutely looking at how the human world as well as the agentic world is evolving and what we need to do to be prepared to not only answer queries coming from humans, but also from those agents.
100%. How much of that approach do you think is going to disrupt the business flow?
I think it's going to disrupt a lot of it. Because, we barely, there are elements, if you will, fundamentals that are kind of changing, if you will. It's not the players of the games that are being changed. It's the rules of the game itself that are also being resetted. Up until now, I can give you a very quick example around it, which is, you look at customer support and services. And one of the key metrics around that is around time to resolution and time to connect and, get in front of the customer and kind of give them a response. When we move into the next world of so-called agentic AI, and it's at the center of what we got to do, I think time essentially becomes irrelevant because everything would have been executed by a program. And so, the time it took for an agent to understand, discern, come back with a resolution set, inform the customer, and then execute those tasks, all of that is going to get compressed.
Yes.
And so monitoring time is not going to be the key driver. I guess the key driver in that case would be sentiment analysis, the empathy that needs to be shared with the customer, and the feeling that the customer is going to have walking away from that call, whether they would continue to have relationships with that organization or not. I think those are the metrics that we'll
See,
have
fundamentally, even that comes down to marketing. But the subject of cybersecurity is obviously everywhere. And data, I mean, the other day I got literally, let's say, my card got abused by one of the largest aggregators in this market. How do we as organizations give the safety to our consumers upon giving us their data? It starts with the mobile and it goes all the way to all the further details we receive from them.
True. Cybersecurity at GMG is non-negotiable. And what I mean by that is there is no way as an organization we take that in a light way. I mean, we absolutely understand that a data of our customers, of our employees, of our principals, of our competition, all of that essentially is extremely valuable. These are crown jewels that are shared in many ways with GMG, and we become the custodian of that data set. And so we have that responsibility to protect that at whatever.
But how do we do that? Because I mean, we everyone would say that, right? I don't think many people would say yes, we take it lightly. But how is that reassurance actually given? It's part of the experience, right?
Correct. I think there are many ways, multiple ways through which we do that at GMG.
Aside from making your employees' life a little bit less experiential by banning a lot of the things.
Yeah, well, that goes. With a lot of power comes responsibility. Let's just put it that way. And I think in some pockets we feel that we need to just take a slow pace approach around that, and that's where you see some barriers. But over the period, I think we will start loosening it out. But going back to that original question of yours, how do we really do this? I think it starts with embracing some of these frameworks that have always been around in the marketplace and they've been matured enough, likes of NIST 2.0, embracing that framework, not in parts and pieces, but completely. Going to zero trust methodology, if you will, of protecting crown jewels and information within the organization, which essentially starts by looking at the current state of where we are today, looking at the perimeter and addressing the attack surface in which we currently are exposed to, and then making sure there are compensating controls to protect us. Mm-hmm. It's also about continuously doing monitoring and measuring of where our controls are today, how many of those are stacking up to the type of vulnerabilities that we are up against, and also in many ways looking at all the threat actors out there who are continuously targeting with malicious intent, if you will, and trying to preempt as much as we possibly can. So that's one part of it. The second part of it is essentially making sure that there are enough safety nets, controls, and redundancy that in an event, if things do go down south or sideways, there are ways for us to manage our business better and have that continuity in place. And I think technology and cybersecurity and people and policies and all of those frenzies things that kind of keeps us busy, I guess, all will have to come to play to protect the better interest of our consumers as well as of our organization.
100%. So then, Kamal, with such a heavy but super interesting, I mean, when I say heavy, you're talking to totally a non-tech person. Listen, I could be many things at once, but tech is not one of them. Do you feel that from a consumer, people consuming our session today, is there anything that you would like to add value and add to our session by telling them today? Or do you think we've covered a fair share for today's session?
I think we covered a mighty number of topics today in our session. And I do believe that technology, is coming to us at a really fast pace. Individuals and fellow colleagues, they are going to be challenged, if you will, in many ways than others to embrace this change that's coming their way. And I definitely feel that the technology function is going to pave the path, and it's going to closely partner with the business in realizing the transformation goals that we ought to achieve together. And so I really look forward to this journey at GMG and look forward to working with a lot of us in truly dominating the marketplace.
Totally agreed. Thank you very much, Kamal, for being with us today. And thank you, everyone, for listening to another episode of People and Purpose podcast by GMG.